And deeper down that rabbit hole we go. And oh my God, we're going to go into some rabbit holes tonight, chasing those red pills, those blue pills, those black pills, those white pills. We are going to some amazing places as always. And yes, welcome to Aeon Byte. So glad to see you. My name is Miguel Connor, and I am your pompatus of Gnosis. Welcome, everybody, on this Mercury day. And I hope everybody is doing well and everybody is waking up. We fight the good fight here against the Archons and their Karens and Katamites in the establishment. We're running with those searching for the truth and avoiding those who have found it. And yes, we're writing our own gospel and living our own myth. And it is truly an honor to have with us today Jesse Beltran. Jesse, how are you doing?
Doing well. Thank you for having me on your show.
Honor is all ours. And with us too, we've got the Moondog Vance. Vance, how are you doing?
I'm just fine. Looking forward to learning about the covert influences that befall us in the rabbit hole.
And there are many. There are many.
Oh, yeah.
But that's what we do here is we lift the veil and help those find their own path, find their own destiny with their own voice and hopefully their own volition. I see everybody already in the stream. Already good people. Hey, Paul, I think I just saw you at Astronosis a couple of days ago. How you doing? I see him, Vance. It must be his CIA guy or double. I see Graham Pong. I see a lot of cool people. And of course, you always know if you have any questions, please super chat them so we can separate you and get you to and get your question out. And same as always. And please, hopefully there'll be no Witiko in the Chitico. Or to turn it into the Chitico and not much else. We want to get to the main event here. As always, please subscribe, share, like, all that good stuff. Support Aeon Byte in any way you can. Patreon, AB Prime, Red Circle. You can join as cheap as $1 at Patreon. One-time donations are always appreciated. Help us keep the lights of the Pleroma on. I can't do it without you, but that's independent media for you. It all depends on you supporting this revolution of the spirit of the mind. Well, Jesse, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to become a heretic, as I like to say here.
Okay. Well, again, my name's Jesse Beltran. I'm a retired firefighter paramedic out of the city of Sacramento in California. I am also a certified master hypnotist with a diploma in hypnotherapy. And formerly, I was the president of an organization called the International Center Against the Abuse of Covert Technologies.
Okay. Covert technologies, yes. And right now you are, and we want to get to the Nexus event, but right now you're working, or you're the president of Cosmic Clarity Connections. Could you tell the audience a little bit about that?
Yes, we're promoting a Mind Nexus Live Event.com. And what it is we're merging space, science, and spirituality. We wanted a platform and where we can get experts from different backgrounds to come and enlighten people and awakening the general population about what's really going on in our world today. And we have an all-star lineup, and we can talk about that a little bit later.
For sure. Yeah, I love the fact where science and spirituality meet. So I'm assuming, like all of us here, you believe that for too long in the Cartesian universe, this got separated. But the truth is the mind and body are one. Science and spirituality should be one, right? I mean, the survival of our species depends on it, don't you think, Jesse?
Most definitely. And not only does it depend on it, it's imperative that because we live in a technocratic society, and unfortunately, those in charge are not using it in a just way. We also have to use our minds and our spirits and our conglomerate conglomerating together so that we come out with the truth, and so we can disseminate the truth so that others realize what reality is, and that what you may be experiencing may not necessarily be a medical phenomenon, but an induced phenomenon.
Agreed. Yeah, and if you don't mind just stepping a little bit back, there's a little bit of a pop. Do you hear a pop on his mic, Vance?
Is that better?
Yeah, it was. I didn't notice it actually.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, okay. Yeah, it's much better
Okay.
now. Well,
Okay,
awesome.
good.
Yeah. And before we get started with some of your work, your work is in hypnotism, and thank God we live in 2024 because, again, holistic and modalities are so much more accepted. There's less misunderstanding. Last time I relapsed, and it was self hypnotism and healing hypnotism, and I have worked with hypnotherapy. It's been invaluable to get me straightened out and on the road of waking up. But maybe you can tell the audience, what is really hypnotism, or how do you tell people what is hypnotism?
Well, what I practice is hypnotherapy. And most people have these preconceived ideas, what Hollywood puts out there or what they see at the state fair, stage hypnotism. And it really gives hypnosis sometimes a bad connotation. But hypnotherapy is a very quick and effective way to deal with either traumas, phobias, smoking cessation, eating issues, and it can also be used as a superpower. I'm writing a book right now called Undue Influence, turning your suggestibility into your superpower, because it could be used like for performance enhancement. You hear these stories of someone a mother becoming superhuman, lifting a vehicle. And basically what that is tapping into the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind allows us to access resources within ourselves that we wouldn't normally have when we have our critical thinking factors on. And the critical thinking factors that we have are everything that we've been conditioned to believe from childhood up, everything we've been indoctrinated to, all of your belief systems, and you're always assessing whether your environment of reality matches with that critical thinking factor. And what hypnosis does, it pretty much puts that aside, allows you to have complete access to the subconscious. And little do people understand, your subconscious mind is really the one that protects you 100% of the time. For example, every beat that your heart has, your breathing, your blink reflexes, all these things, your subconscious, or they call it the parasympathetic nervous system, but they correlate with each other. And that is where change really happens. There's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Richard Bandler, who was the co-creator of neurolinguistic programming, and he uses this analogy. He says, when you access the subconscious mind, you're allowed to reprogram a neuron that it maybe has bad programming, and then you can reaffirm it with positive programming on what the individual's goals are and what it is they're trying to accomplish. And basically, you paraphrase it in hypnotic language that you can instill on the subconscious, and then the output is changed almost immediately. And that's in essence.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, you said,
yeah.
it's I always say it's just a form of meditation that gets you deep into the unconscious. Like you said, that's where all the answers are. As somebody said, if 99% of our mind is working unconsciously to run our body, shouldn't we listen to our body? I mean, it knows more than our little ego sort of floating in this ocean of consciousness. And I think that's what we've forgotten. And fascinating, what you said actually happened to my aunt in Portugal. She was there. This is years ago with my cousin. Car came, just out of nowhere. Some crazy driver, while she was waiting for the bus, ran over my cousin, and all of a sudden, this 120-pound lady just pulled the car up, and she still cannot believe it. There wasn't even an option. It's like, I'm getting this car off of my cousin, and thank God he survived. But wildest story. So, and it happens a
Well,
lot.
yeah. Yeah, it does happen, and it's not unheard of. And so I love using that analogy and those stories so that people understand that we are far, far greater than we ever give credit to ourselves, just as long as you give the chance to allow it to happen and have an open mind.
Yeah, well said indeed. And that's what we try to do at the show, Jesse. The ancient Gnostics and Hermeticists said the mind is this super fusion engine, and we humans haven't even tapped into a fraction of it. And that's our great gift. That's how we become caretakers of the cosmos, by accessing our mind and taking care of nature, animals, and doing what the gods need us to do. So I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. So where would you like to start? Do you have something, Ben? Sorry.
Yeah, I did.
Vance?
I benefited from a hypnotherapist some years ago when I was having a problem with my father, and he kind of hurt me very deeply, and it really benefited me. So I know it firsthand.
I specialize in PTSD, and that's a form of PTSD, whether we like it or not. It's reality. And the nice thing about hypnotherapy is, it's like I said, you can very quickly and very effectively start to experience change within the first session that you have. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, where do you want to start, Jesse? I mean, you tell us where you want to go. Yeah. I'm fascinated. Go ahead.
So I'm gonna just dive into the rabbit hole and talk about what I have accomplished with the International Center Against the Abuse of Covert Technologies, and we'll use the acronym ISA-ACT for short. And the reason it came about is I met a gentleman by the name of Dr. John Hall, who is an anesthesiologist out of Texas, and just a plethora of knowledge. He's written 2 books. The first book was called A New Breed: Satellite Terrorism in America, and the second book is called Guinea Pigs: Technologies of Control. And I met him in Texas, and we got on the topic of him seeing patients who were complaining of having a certain phenomenon. Now, recently, what's been in the forefront is this phrase called Havana Syndrome, or anomalous health incidences. Mm-hmm. And the Havana Syndrome was reported by United States diplomats in Havana, Cuba, at the U.S. Embassy. And they were complaining of having this acute onset of strange sounds being transmitted to them. And they were getting migraines and nausea, vomiting, vertigo, brain fog, short-term, long-term memory issues, and electrical shocks to the extremities. And this was first reported, according to them, in 2016, but it's actually started in 2014. And it was not only happening to our diplomats, it was also happening to our CIA agents, our FBI agents, and family members. And in March of this year, the Department of Homeland Security held a hearing, and a gentleman by the name of Colonel Greg Edgren, retired, gave testimony with regards to this issue. He only helps federal employees who have suffered injuries or traumas over the years during their tenure. And he was asked to look into this phenomenon called the Havana Syndrome. And it initially didn't get any ground where the United States was supporting them, not until it started happening to diplomats in the Canadian embassy, and also to their family members and so forth. And the Canadian government immediately supported them, and the United States jumped on board in 2016 and put aside funding to help them. Now, interesting enough, it was happening to our best of the best, the elite of the elite, our greatest minds in our federal government. They were going after. And what he was concerned about is this was a national security issue because it's taking them out of service. It's very debilitating. Now, I'll jump back to Dr. John Hall. Now, interesting enough, the people that he was seeing were complaining of the same phenomenon. And so I asked, so why aren't we doing anything about it? And he said, it's because, and we talk about this was 20 years ago, and if we look at the mindset of our medical community then, if anyone followed traditional medicine, went to the physician and started to say they were hearing strange sounds, they were automatically railroaded into the mental health industry, and they were either put on medication or given that stigma, and so they were re-victimized again. And if we remember, people who were given that stigma, they pretty much lose all credibility in our society, which is very unfortunate. So I said, let's figure out a way to make these individual cases into objective data. So that's how I created ISA Act. And our first meeting was held in Sacramento, California, and we had over 100 people show up. And interestingly enough, they all had the very exact same complaints with very little deviation. And so I found that fascinating. I was expecting maybe a handful of people, not 100. Then our second meeting was held in Davis, California, and then 300 people showed up. And so what we were doing is we were doing radio frequency testing. And we were utilizing a device called the JM20 Pro, and it allowed us to calibrate so that we had to be within a couple of inches of an emission for it to show positive. And what the data was showing when we were doing this is that the primary victims were Caucasian women in their 40s, highly educated, recently single, widowed, or divorced. Then it fell to Caucasian males, then African-American females, African-American males, then Asians in the same categories. And it dwindled down in ethnicity from there. Then we continued to do the testing through the Midwest, and the exact same results. And then, until we got into the Chicago area, it was a minor flip where the predominant race was African-Americans, then Caucasians, then Asians, and then it fell from there. And it remained that way all the way to the East Coast, with one anomaly, which was in Virginia. And in Virginia, I was invited to do the RF testing for a bunch of folks there, and they were all military subcontractors. And I asked everyone, and this is why I became a certified master hypnotist, because I've been practicing since the early 2000s, became certified in 2014. And I asked the group, if I were to ask you, are you highly suggestible? No one raised their hand. And then I said, if you're not suggestible, raise your hand. And almost everyone did. And I picked the most intimidating gentleman in the room. And he was 6'6", about 260, 270 pounds, very fit, good-looking man, African-American gentleman. Interesting enough, he was working on the AIDS virus in 2010, 2011, right there. And I found that fascinating. I go, why is the military working on the AIDS virus when it's been around for over 20 years at that point? Yeah. But they were still working on it. And so him and I were talking, and had his hands held together. And then by the time we were done, I say, do me a favor, pull your hands apart. And he tried, and he couldn't. And he became a little anxious, and so we don't want that because it's called an abreaction. So I go, sleep. So he immediately went to sleep. Mm-hmm. And my whole purpose of the demonstration was to show everyone in the room that if you're highly suggestible, that just through language, just carrying on a conversation, if someone knows what they're doing, they can pretty much get you to do almost anything. Okay, now why is this important to know with this phenomenon? Mm-hmm. There's a couple of cases. One was a gentleman by the name of Aaron Alexis, and he killed 16 people at the Navy Yard on the East Coast. And there's another gentleman by the name of Myron May. He was an attorney out of Florida, and he killed, I think it was 3 people at the university there. Now, both of these gentlemen contacted me before they did what they did, and I had no indication that they were going to do what they were going to do. It was horrible. They were complaining of these exact same symptoms. Now, Colonel Egren says that he believes that this phenomena is singling out these individuals, and they say it's some type of electromagnetic pulse weapon. So some type of frequency that was being emitted at them. And I've always used a common sense approach because I've been dealing with this phenomena for over 20 years now. And I've had enough exposure to people who complain about these symptoms. We knew that it was some type of radio frequency that was being transmitted. But these radio frequencies are in the ambient atmosphere. So it's hitting everyone. Okay. And so the common sense approach was, so what is it about these individuals that makes them special that they receive this signal? Although it's not special, it's a horrible phenomenon to be affected by. And what we've found, Miguel, if you can pull up that screen real quick for your listeners.
You might have to. Let's see, where is it?
You want me to pull it up? I can.
We got the infinite rabbit hole, so you'll have to go to your.
Okay, so right here.
There you go.
Okay, so what we're finding is that we're pulling out implants out of these individuals. Okay, now this particular specimen was over 20 years, and this is ago, and look how small they are. You see the letter on that penny?
Yeah.
They're almost the size of that letter.
Wow.
And they're various types of implants. Now, this particular case, this gentleman's name was David Larson, and this is out of the David Larson report. He was a politician out of Southern California, and he had many of these. I think it was 10 or more. I'm sure it was more than 10 that were pulled from his person. Now, he sued because these implants were traced back to a medical company. And the suit was thrown out and dismissed by the judge because Mr. Larson inadvertently signed a signature to participate in an experiment. And the issue was they did not give him full disclosure. And this is part of our fight, is that if anyone is going to participate in any type of study, that they be given the opportunity to have full disclosure about what is going to be done with them. Because Mr. Larson, had he known that they were going to do this to him, he would have never participated in this. Okay. So.
Wow. Holy Elon Musk, Manchurian candidate. The chat room has gone crazy, Jesse.
Yes.
How do I get it? Is it in me?
Yeah, we'll talk about this.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. This is another case. This is called the Bob Boyce case. Now, Bob Boyce was an inventor of a high-efficiency engine. And what we're looking at here, this is actually a cancerous tumor. If you look at these tweezers and look at the end of the tweezers, you see a microchip. So this is an older type technology. And the story Bob tells, when I spoke to him, he said, Jesse, I had just succumbed that I was going to die from this cancer. And till one day, he was in what's called a Faraday cage. And a Faraday cage is a small environment that's grounded, and it doesn't allow EMF emissions to escape, and it's supposed to block out certain spectrums coming in. Now, Bob was testing his inventions for RF leakage, and his frequency detector, which is what we use in the preliminary scans, the wand went across his shoulder and it pinged. And so he thought that was odd and went and got an X-ray, and that's where they found the microchip in the tumors. Now, it was removed, taken to pathology. Bob's cancer went into remission, and he thought he was over it until the cancer came back very aggressively. Now, I asked him what happened to that microchip that they pulled out, and he says it disappeared after it went to pathology. So when the cancer came back aggressively, he rescanned himself in the Faraday cage, and they found a second chip. This time they used the chain of custody, and they weren't going to let that get out of their hands. And when they traced the serial number of this microchip, it went back to an NSA database. Now, interesting enough, Bob's story goes like this. He loves Mountain Dew. He was in his office at work one day, and his business partner brought him a Mountain Dew. And then Bob woke up 3 days later and didn't know why. Well, it turns out his business partner was a former NSA employee. Okay. Now, show you a couple more. Actually, one more.
Yeah, former quote unquote.
Yeah, former.
You never leave the club, as they say.
Yeah. So this is an MRI, and this particular patient, if you look around the circle in red, remember that microchip that they just pulled out of Bob Boyce. You can actually see the chip, which is in the TMJ area of this patient. And this patient had it bilaterally. If you blow this up, you can actually see the coil and superimpose the chip over it, and they line up. It's kind of interesting to watch. So this has been our fight through ISAC. And this is not only taking me across the United States, but it's actually taken me around the world. I've been all through Europe. I've had government agencies invite me over so that I can come and test their employees. And they asked me to sign an NDA, and they took me to a remote location where I can use what's called an anechoic chamber. And this anechoic chamber is a very robust Faraday cage. It's millions of dollars, and it blocks out huge frequency spectrums. And we use controls, so we use people who we knew weren't victims, and we took them in the environment, and we got zero frequency emissions. But what's interesting, everyone that we scanned in the preliminary environments, and we documented where they were lighting up, lit up with frequency emissions in the anechoic chamber. So they came up positive within that environment. Okay. And now, yeah, and then I'm going to show you, this is where we're at today. These are the type of implants that are being removed from people today. And this is one of my earliest clients. Now, this is a laboratory report. I've redacted the lab and the physician's name so they don't get bombarded, and they continue to help with cases when we have someone to bring to them. So these were 3 specimens that were removed. And this is our dilemma today. This is what they look like today. There's the nanowires. It's actually our bodies will actually encapsulate them. They do not reject them. And wow. Yeah, and they're nano size.
Oh my God.
So radiographic imagery today will never pick these up. So what needs to happen is what we do in the field now is if someone comes up positive on an preliminary RF scan, what we tell them to do is, because we don't know if they have older technology, which are the larger chips, mm-hmm. or whether they have this newer technology. So we always have them get radiographic imagery. So we always say, see if you can get an MRI scan or a panoramic X-ray so that we can check these areas and then various areas throughout their body. Now, people were asking, how are these getting in people? The only thing I can say is what the data is inferring, okay? Now, all the people who are complaining about these Havana Syndrome type symptoms, we can superimpose their scans over each other and they all line up, okay? Interesting enough, everyone who's been in the military, soldiers, we can superimpose them over each other and they line up. And also incarcerated people. They're slightly different, but we superimpose them over each other and they line up. And here's where it gets further down the rabbit hole. I'm going to.
I don't think we're going any deeper, but
we're going to go deeper. Okay.
Oh, we're going to go deeper. Right?
We're going to go deeper. So this is a lawsuit. It's called the DeVore case. Now, Dawn DeVore was a nurse and worked for the Department of Corrections. She ended up being a whistleblower. And because of this, she ended up in this program. Now, this is an intercepted document that was submitted to the courts as Exhibit 2. And it's from the Intelli Connection and Security Division of IBM. This is confidential, and this was only supposed to be seen amongst top-level people. And it's called the 2020 neural chip implant. And I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs just to get to the point. It says, the control of crime will be paramount concern in the 21st century. We must be ready with our security products when the demand for them becomes popular. Our Research and Development Division has been in contact with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, the California Department of Corrections, the Texas Department of Public Safety, and the Massachusetts Department of Corrections to run limited trials of the 2020 neural chip implant. Okay. Now, what they were doing is they were knocking out prisoners and non-consensually putting them in them. This last paragraph. In California, several prisoners were identified as members of security, as a security threat. Now, remember, they're doing this to protect us. They were brought to the health services at Pelican Bay and tranquilized with advanced sedatives developed by our Cambridge, Massachusetts laboratory. The implant procedure takes about 60 to 90 minutes, depending upon the experience of the technician. And they're working on a device that will reduce the time by as much as 60%. So they'll get faster and more efficient at doing this to people. Okay, and it says the results of implants on 8 prisoners yielded the following results. Implants served as surveillance monitoring device to the threat group. So in other words, not only could they track where they were able to receive and transmit information from them.
Oh.
Okay. Implants disabled 2 subjects during an assault on correctional staff. The universal side effects in all 8 test subjects revealed that when an implant was set to 116 megahertz, all subjects became lethargic and slept on an average of 18 to 22 hours.
Wow. There's a behavior control. Wow.
There it is. And they can manipulate the frequencies. They already know what frequencies they need to send to you to make you aggressive, to make you docile, to get you to we'll touch on it, because this next report that I read to you is, you might say we can't go any deeper than this. Well, we go deeper than this. Okay. Okay.
They're like in X-Files territory.
Yes. Each subject was monitored for aggressive activity during the test period, and the findings are conclusive that out of the 8 test subjects exhibited no aggression even when provoked. Okay. So what does this mean?
They'd have to beam something to the patients, and the implant would receive it and then affect the patient. Is that the way it works?
Well,
something has to control the implant.
I would say, right? The victim. Yeah, it's a victim. Yeah, they're all controlled by signals.
Patients. Yeah, victims.
Yes, these are victims. Yeah.
Agreed.
So this isn't scary enough. I'm about to read the next report, and then it's going to open up a plethora of discussions and questions I already know. So there's a document. It's called the New World Vistas. It was created by the United States Air Force and declassified in 1994. And this is a loan document. This was obtained in 1995, but, serial number, they want to make sure they're documenting everything when they release these. Now, this was done 30 years ago, but this is a document that was created by the United States Air Force greatest minds. And the agenda is to create technology so that the United States Air Force remains a superpower. Okay. Mm-hmm. You have some areas that are highlighted. And it says, it appears likely that there are a number of physical agents that might actively but largely benignly interact or interfere with biological processes in an adversary in a manner that will provide our armed forces the tools to control these adversaries without excessive loss of life or property. These physical agents could include acoustic fields, optical fields, electromagnetic fields, and a combination thereof. This paper will address only the prospect of physical regulation of biological processes using electromagnetic fields. And here we go. Prior to the mid-21st century, there will be a virtual explosion of the knowledge in the field of neuroscience. We will have achieved a clear understanding of how the human brain works, how it really controls the various functions of the body, and how it can be manipulated both positively and negatively. One can envision the development of electromagnetic energy sources, the output of which can be pulsed, shaped, and focused, that can couple with the human body in a fashion that will allow one to prevent voluntary muscular movements, remember the prisoners, control emotions, thus actions, produce sleep, transmit suggestions, interfere with both short-term and long-term memory, produce an experience set, and delete an experience set. This will open the door for the development of some novel capabilities that can be used in armed conflict, in terrorist hostage situations, and in training. New weapons that offer the opportunity of control of an adversary without resorting to a lethal solution or collateral casualties can be developed around this concept. This would offer significant improvements in the capabilities of our special operation forces. Initial experimentation should be focused on the interaction of electromagnetic energy and the neuromuscular junctions involved in voluntary muscle control. Now, this was 30 years ago, and it gets crazier. And it would
now
also
we're in
appear
Black Mirror Dick
Yes.
arenas.
Yes.
Well, so
This
far
is-
they're just imagining it, right? They're saying they project that, you know, in the near future this will be possible. That's what
Okay, well, yeah, but we're in the thick of it. Yeah, back when we
we're in
were
the
doing the
Black
study.
Mirror world.
Yeah. When we were doing the study back in 2010, 2011, the majority of that was experimentation, and then we'll talk about the subsets of other individuals that we believe why they were brought into this program. Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. It says it would also appear possible to create high fidelity speech in the human body, raising the possibility of covert suggestion in psychological direction. When a high-power microwave pulse in the gigahertz range strikes the human body, a very small temperature perturbation occurs. This is associated with the sudden expansion of the slightly heated tissue. This expansion is fast enough to produce an acoustic wave. If a pulse stream is used, it should be possible to create an internal acoustic field in the 5 to 15 kilohertz range, which is audible. Thus, it may be possible to talk to selected adversaries in a fashion that would be most disturbing to them. In comparison to discussion in the paragraphs above, the concept of imprinting an experience set is highly speculative, but nonetheless highly exciting. Modern electromagnetic scattering theory raises the prospect that ultra-short pulse scattering through the human brain can result in reflective signals that can be used to construct a reliable estimate of the degree of central nervous system arousal. The concept behind the remote EEG is to scatter off action potentials or ensembles of action potentials in major central nervous system tracts. Assuming we will understand how our skills are imprinted and recalled, it might be possible to take this concept one step further and duplicate the experience set in another individual. So what they're talking about there, and remember all the symptoms that the best of our best were experiencing. It mirrors exactly what they were pre-planning years ago. And we are now pulling out these implants. And the only way, and we're betting our dollar on this now, the only way you're going to receive this signal is you have to have a mechanism to receive it.
But these
this is why we're pulling them out.
Accident? They were just receiving waves, or they were attacked by
No, this is purposely done.
Oh,
this is
purposely. Okay, but
this is purposely done to people.
But if our military is doing it, Why is our military or maybe foreigners were doing it to our people?
Well, I can say this. The United States, China, Russia, and the UK all have this technology now. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, how is it being done? So Colonel Egrin says he believes it's the Russians that are doing this.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, I would agree in certain circumstances that the Russians are doing this to individuals, particularly in our homeland. But I have seen over 1,000 cases, and most of these people have never left our country.
Mm.
So how are the implants getting in them if they've never left our country?
Right.
So the United States is notorious for experimenting on our own. You can talk about the Tuskegee experiments where they gave African American males syphilis and let it proliferate just to see what it would do.
Exactly.
Or LSD experiments that they were doing in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Ewan Cameron, and this is where this technology ties into what he was doing. He was a Canadian psychiatrist funded by the United States government in order to see whether or not you can erase someone's memories and re-imprint them. And he would use techniques like shock therapy. He would give them drugs to induce long-term sleep, and we're talking like months. And then he would put this helmet over them with a tape recorder in it that would repeat themes over and over and over again while they were in this drug-induced sleep pattern. And now remember this technology now. What is the main complaint of our elite federal employees? They're hearing these strange sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And it's being transmitted 24/7, 365 days a year. So basically what Ewan Cameron was doing was psychic driving in its infancy. We are now dealing with psychic driving on steroids.
Oh. Yeah, that is chilling. Yeah, and of course, there's so much with Henrietta Lacks. The Exorcist was a CIA experiment. World of the Wars, they say, was I mean, over and over, our government has been doing to its own citizens. And you mentioned obviously MK Ultra, so it's
yeah.
Well,
So
the big question is, why hasn't the government, and like in the case of the Havana Syndrome, set up RF monitoring to detect the signals that are incoming, because they can't cause this apparently without having a stimulation from the outside.
Correct. Unless we're doing it.
Oh, to our own people inside
to our own people.
Havana Embassy? Why would they do that?
Well, we can tell you this. They're claiming that the Havana Syndrome just mysteriously popped up in 2016. Earlier cases in the government were about 2014. We have been documenting it since 2010. I have a couple of cases that's 2004, 2005. Now, we know through FOIA releases, that our military was experimenting with implants in the 40s and 50s, putting them in people. So they were the larger rice style type. And then in the 20s, they became the small size of rice. And now, when I was in Virginia, I got to speak with the two individuals. They were a husband and wife team that worked in the Pentagon. And he wanted to know what I was doing there. And I briefly told him, didn't tell him everything, but I'm pretty sure he already knew why I was there. And he said, oh, implants. I can tell you exactly what year they were put in a person just by the style of the implant. And he says, but if it happens to someone today, they're SOL. He says they are so small that it's impossible to pick up on an X-ray or an MRI. And those were the nano-sized implants that were removed from my client that he's referring to.
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying.
Yeah. Years ago,
Yeah.
I've heard for years that what happened with the Havana Syndrome happened in the Moscow embassies in Russia years ago.
Correct.
So it's not insects. It's
No.
not loud locusts or
no, not loud. No. Their cicadias is what they were trying to say that they were hearing, and it wasn't. But here's the thing. The reason I got involved, wanted to take hypnotherapy very seriously, is because as I was going across the United States and throughout Europe, I realized that the people who were most affected were highly suggestible. Okay. Now, let's take the technology aside. Let's throw that away for just a second. 30%. The studies show that 15 to 30% of the population are highly suggestible, very naturally. Okay, and this is why there was a belief system that that only 30% of the population could be hypnotized, but that's untrue. You just need to know the modality to use in order to put someone in trance or hypnotize them. So if you know their suggestibility attributes, then you can use language in order to do this. Now, the reason I bring this up is, if you recall, a lot of these victims, including the federal employees, were talking about hearing, some of them were hearing voices.
Right.
Now, if you have someone like Aaron Alexis or Myron May, who were highly suggestible, but their personality traits initially is when they deal with stress, it's fight or flight. Theirs was fight. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so they went and did what they thought they needed to do, which was wrong and horrible. But just think about this. If you wanted to get someone to do something and not remember, and you're educated on how to do these types of things, you can get someone to do anything that you want, and take someone who's very religious. If you wanted to make them believe that they were talking to God, you can get them to do whatever you want. In fact, in Iraq, they used the voice of God weapon, where they were believing they were hearing Allah speak to them, and Allah told them to give up, and they just gave up. They tried to use this technology in Waco, but they didn't. The person who knew how to operate the equipment, they were a little impatient, and that turned into a disaster. But my feeling is, because people keep saying, well, who's doing this? I think it's a combination of all the superpowers right now, because Colonel Egrin testified in front of Congress at the Homeland Security hearing. He said, this is happening on every continent on this planet with one exception, and that's Antarctica.
Yeah, wait till we find those snowmen. Penguins. We'll put some chips in there.
Those penguins. Like, you got to protect those penguins.
Yeah. We ain't going to put no chips on no penguins, Elon Musk. But yeah, it is terrifying, because obviously, beyond that, as we've shown in the show, remote viewing, remote control is something that the Russians and the Americans have been doing to each other with psychics. Now we're leveling up to the cyberpunk mixture. And of course, many people are wondering about, the assassination attempt on the president. This falls into, I don't know if you're familiar with Dave McGowan's work, Program to Kill. And all these serial killers, you can find out they usually grew up or were in a military base, or lived near a military base, or lived in some sort of experimental medical facility, and you start to wonder what is going on. But as you've shown, it wouldn't be too hard to create this figure who would take out whoever you wanted to take out, right?
Or work with BlackRock,
Yeah. Well, that and be in their commercial like the young man was, right?
Right.
So
there you go.
But if you look at throughout history, superpowers and those in control have always tried to use an approach of divide and conquer. Mm-hmm. Keep everyone separated, keep everyone fighting against each other, so that they can be distracted, so that they can secure their powers and secure their wealth. Okay. Now, if you wanted to do a huge social engineering project, this is the perfect avenue to do it. And I think we're in the midst of it. They are so brazen that they feel that they can institute this now, and there's nothing that we can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Especially, like you said, individuals who have no rights. Soldiers are slaves, and prisoners are basically slaves. They have half the rights we have. So
yeah,
they're perfect.
Yeah, and Colonel Egrins, when he was asked, what's the objective? Is this to kill someone? People have died from this. But his explanation was, this is a slow kill. And this is really meant to make someone look like they're crazy. Now, if you wanted to, you talk about soldiers or slaves, the mental health industry, if someone's diagnosed with mental illness, they're no longer valid in our society. We put them down at the bottom of the food chain. So if they speak up and say, hey, I think I have an implant in me, no one's going to care. No one's going to care. And this has been the construct. So, and this is why we develop what we do. We do a preliminary scan, which is out in the field. And the reason we did that is because we can do large numbers at one time. And then if they went and got we asked them to get either a toxicology report, MRIs, X-rays, and let's see what you have. And then what finally needs to happen is you have to get what is called a nonlinear junction scan. And I'll describe what that is and why it's important to get that done. Now, a nonlinear junction scan will test for not only the active, the one that's on 365 days a year, but it also tests for passive type technology. And that's the reason why the toxicology report is important, because if there are high levels of metals in your system, then there's a probability that you might have some technology in you. Mm-hmm. So what a nonlinear junction scan will do is it'll send an echo, initial echo, test to see if there's any ferrous material. And if it is, that it'll send an echo back to the scanner, and it'll send a secondary echo, which will turn on that passive technology, so that passive implant. And then it'll send a third, and it'll get the frequency and location of where that's at. So that's why we use that methodology. So because this is not a disease process initially, but it can create disease processes like Bob Boyce, who got cancer. And the reason I want to be clear on that to your listeners is that if you feel that you are suffering from a disease process, definitely go to your medical professional and tell them your symptoms. Don't tell them your theory. Okay. And then after that, if you're not getting any headway and you believe that this may be the phenomenon that you're experiencing, then you're going to have to go outside the medical community. You're going to have to go to an agency who does this type of scanning, or has resources that can get you the type of lab work that you need to get.
And what are some, besides you, what are some other ones? Because there's a veteran in the chat right now, and he's freaking out because he was in the military.
Yeah.
Where would you send him?
Well, I can only attest to what we do. I know there are some individuals out there that do something similar, but I don't know if they're as thorough.
We want them to go to you. Don't worry first. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. So, and if they come to us, and we'll guide them. And like I said, we have we have top talent, access to top talent, and that's what's important here. But more importantly, education is the primary line of defense. We have to make sure that we educate the general population, because what has happened over the last 20 years is these individuals who are suffering from domestic Havana Syndrome are grouped together, and they're one little umbrella, and they're in their own little biosphere, and the rest of society is out here knowing nothing about this. And if they do get exposed to it, automatically they think that these individuals are a bunch of tinfoil hat people, which is not the reality. Now, here's the crazy thing. How many homeless people are out roaming our country right now who have mental illness?
Many.
And I'm really curious, how many of them really have domestic Havana syndrome?
Many were in the military or in law enforcement, or like you said, spend time in prison, asylums. So yeah, that's a good point,
Yeah.
Jesse. They could have easily
Yeah.
been chipped at some point.
Yes. So,
Wow.
yeah.
It's horrific. Yeah, these poor souls. I mean, yeah, it's bad enough we have, people who suffer from schizophrenia and addiction. Now we've got a whole nother, like you say it's not a disease. It is. I mean, it kind of is for many people.
Well, it's not a disease process if someone non-consensually implants you and then starts inflicting this type, because it's torture.
It is
and
torture,
it's torture. And what eventually happens, it is a slow kill. And I know dozens of people who have been killed this way. And it's not initially from the technology being implanted. It's because there are no resources to help them. And they usually commit suicide.
Yeah, that's horrible. And these implants can last forever? Do they have a shelf life?
I have cases right now. I have a gentleman who has been suffering from this for over 60 years.
Oh my God. Horrible.
Yeah. So
bless him.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, I'm wondering what kind of RF network the torturers would have to affect the people no matter where they were. You'd think that maybe they could go on vacation somewhere, in the woods or something where the stations that are transmitting to them can't reach them. The signal has to be at least a certain strength, I would imagine, in order to control the implants.
We know that it's satellite based. It is satellite based, and it
Starlink.
is. It does. No. This was going on before Starlink, but it is satellite based. I've taken individuals miles down in our Earth, and still they come up positive for the frequency emission. I have a case right now. He was a special ops. He's retired. And he had a weird experience. He had a loss of time, and it freaked him out. He couldn't understand why. And so I go, I'm curious, because I recall most of the people that I tested in the military weren't special ops, but he was, and he was highly intelligent individual. And so we recently had him scanned. And what was interesting about him, and it's the first of its kind in 20 years, he had a frequency emission that we've never seen before. And it would only happen when he was in the room. So it was definitely following him. And when we tracked that frequency back to who owned it, it went back to NATO. And so now we're curious. So what the hell is one of our special ops guys emitting a frequency that is controlled by NATO? I don't know. So the jury's still out. But if there are any special ops guys out there that are having this phenomena or just want to get scanned, we're very curious too. We would love to put you through the process just to get more data.
Excellent. Yes, and we do have links so you can get a hold of Jesse tonight in the show notes, whether you're listening on audio or video. So, yeah, this is extremely important and very disturbing news. But again, that's how you fight them. As we've talked, the government has been doing this forever, since they use soldiers for cannon fodder, since propaganda, since mass media. This is just the next stage, right, Jesse? This is the next level warfare, mind control, uses as a guinea pigs.
Yeah, and
there's a clicking coming from your mic, I think.
I'm going to back up. Okay.
I was wondering if I was
sorry about that.
Voices in my head. I was like,
no.
Where are the satellites?
Yeah.
No. Gosh, now I
Sorry.
lost my train of thought. So.
I'm sorry.
This is the next level
I know what I was going to say.
warfare, right? This
Yeah,
is the next level. This is 21st century. We're taking it to the next level.
Yeah, but President Putin said that the first superpower to master psychotronic weapons will be the one controlling the entire world. Mm-hmm. So part of this, I think, is we're in an arms race right now, and we're in the midst of it. And that's why we're seeing this on every continent, with the exception of Antarctica. And it wasn't until recently, I'd say within the last 5 to 6 years, I rarely got contacted by anyone from South America. But now it seems like we're getting more and more complaints from down in those regions.
Yeah, and I hope you guys work on detection, because even I know as much as I like to think it's science fiction, you might get into a point where you could drink these nano microchips, or they can do it in 2 seconds. You know what I mean? We're getting to that place.
Well, they are that size now.
We need countermeasures. What we need.
Yeah. It's countermeasures that we need, and that's been the hard part. Because the only way to really stop this is to have the technology removed from you. We've recently come up with a couple of inventions that will allow someone, because here's what happens is they hear this high pitch ringing. It's about the 10 kilohertz range, and they go to their doctors and they get diagnosed with tinnitus or Meniere's disease, but they describe it as someone has their hands on the volume and messing with them, going up and down, up and down. Tinnitus doesn't do that. So we've been able to come up with a technique using frequency generators, and very inexpensively help them at least that modulated 10 kilohertz signal coming in, because that's the part that's debilitating to your mind. It doesn't allow you to sleep, get rest, you get fatigued, and then you start getting all these other issues. But it'll block it out, and then it'll allow you to get that rest, allow your brain to recover. So at least it's a Band-Aid for now. But and you can, as long as you have noise canceling devices where you can hear the ambient air, you can transmit that frequency to yourself, and it'll block it out. And it's worked 100% of the time.
Wow. And I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, you can't ban it in the United States, because the military is just going to go, if we don't use it, the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, they're going to hit us hard. So it's a horrible situation to be in, right?
Yeah. And just so you get an idea of the demographics that have been experienced this, I've had judges, I've had attorneys, I've had doctors come to me, white collar workers, blue collar workers, the whole gamut. And what's really because it's devastating, it really is debilitating. I've had physicians lose their multi-million-dollar practices because they go to traditional medicine and they get labeled with a mental health disorder, and they're not allowed to touch anyone. You're done. So this is why I tell everyone, just give them your symptoms, let them come up with a diagnosis. They're the professionals if you think it's medical. But if you think it may be technology-based, then we have some avenues at least to entertain it and test you for it. Yeah.
Amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. The people in the chat are, they're freaking out. If you have any questions, please super chat them. This is your time to do that. I know we've done a little over an hour. Do you still have time, Jesse? Because I'd like to talk to you some more about your experience.
Yeah. I have a little bit more time. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to hear about the connection to the alien implants and the UFOs, if there is any.
But good topic.
Before we get to that one, I want to mention a sponsor, and it is the perfect sponsor, because one of our sponsors for Gnosis, our conference, is none other than Greg Carwood at the Higher Side Chats. And Greg has done incredible shows, dozens, maybe hundreds of shows on mind control, MK Ultra, alien mind control, interdimensional. He's done it all, and he's done an excellent job. For those of you who don't know, and you should, the Higher Side Chats is an interview-based podcast where Greg, great guy, met him a few days ago, hosts conversations with the best researchers, authors, and experts on a whole host of unusual, suppressed, alternative, paranormal, occult, and all-around fringe topics like mind control. As a fan of both podcasts and conspiracy culture, THC tries to raise the bar, take the best of both, and avoid some of the major annoyances many people have with the medium. So yeah, check out the Higher Side Chats. And again, his show is definitely full of the topics we are talking tonight. So, well, back to you, Jesse. The question Van said, alien implants. You've had, however you want to spell it. I know you've had a experience. I've had 2 in my life, but tell us about yours.
Okay. Well, I've never had an alien experience. I've had a near-death experience, and we can
sure
touch on that at philosophical probably a little later. But I don't want to lose the flow, because talking about the alien implant phenomenon is probably the next thing to talk about. So I'm on the fence. The super soldier issue, where people claim that they've been abducted and then put into the super soldier program, I think there's a connection here. Now, the alien abductions, I'm on the fence on that. And the reason being is because we have to use scientific methodology. I really feel we need to do that. Because the fact that we know that man is doing this to humans, and there's no refuting that, we have the evidence, okay? We then have to and remember the New World Vistas, and we remember the document that we intercepted from the prisons. They can embed false memories in a person, okay? So what we need to do is we really need to take a closer look at those abductee cases where they believe they've been abducted by aliens and then implanted. I know Dr. Lear was the grandfather of that. But we need to take a closer look at that. And the reason I'm saying this is that technology is moving at a pace that we can't even fathom. Right now, the nanotechnology field, they are now making self-replicating, they call them nanobots. And these things can, they get injected into a person, and then what the studies are showing that these things can work together and actually affect your DNA. And they can have resonating properties. All the types of things that we're seeing that people are complaining about right now. So we're now moving into that era, and you can look at all military studies. Bill Gates talks about how inexpensive this self-replicating technology is. And we are now losing our classifications as humans. When you start putting this type of tech, this transhumanism movement, this super soldier movement that we're seeing, is in full force right now. And we have to have a serious discussion, but we got to get everyone together on the same page, and then decide where do we go from here? How do we take back our power? That's the real dilemma.
Very much so. I mean, even with UFO and extraterrestrial, the government is still playing the song and dance. So obviously, take back our power, you would say organizations like yours and what you do is one thing, come together, science, spirituality, psychology, mysticism, anything, and start creating communities and organizations that can push back, answer questions, do the work, do the magic, even if you have to, right?
Correct. Yeah. No. We love everyone. We will not turn you away. We want we want everyone. We want everyone there. We want everyone to be educated, particularly if you think this is happening to you. It's very important, because I don't want another Aaron Alexis or a Marin May type incident or these high percentage of mind control victims that are going out and shooting people. We we really need to wake up and educate the general population so that you know what to look for, particularly if it's a loved one or a friend or some family member or someone that you see might be exhibiting these types of signs, that you know exactly what the possibilities might be, and maybe we can use early intervention and circumvent an atrocity from happening again.
Oh yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
do you have issues with the usual government propaganda trying to, like you said, if you go and you say voices in your head, they call you crazy, but they also like to do it to entire organizations, or,
Yeah.
they have many
What?
techniques. The first is, paint you all as cranks, and then they'll do even other things to you.
Yeah. Well, prior to March of this year, when the Department of Homeland Security held that hearing, I would never be doing interviews like this. We've remained quiet for all this time because that's exactly what the modality was. Oh, these guys are a bunch of tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists. That was the name of the game. But once the Department of Homeland Security and Congress now says, wait a minute, are you saying we're being attacked on our homeland right now? Now it's a totally different story.
Right.
And Colonel Eggerman says, look, the whole agenda is to make these people look crazy. This is why we're out here full force right now. This is why I'm doing sometimes 2-3 shows a day. And it's people are very interested in hearing this and hearing what we've done and hearing what we're doing and what the agenda is. Because what I envision, because there are no resources, even though the Department of Homeland Security set millions of dollars aside for our veterans and our federal employees, they still can't go to the VA and get treatment for it because there's no code for Havana Syndrome. No. And so that was also part of the recommendations at that hearing. Look, you guys need to make sure that the VA has a code for Havana Syndrome, so the millions of dollars that you have sitting for these guys, men and women, are being able to be utilized for their treatments, because it does show brain trauma for those who are being affected by this.
Yeah, it's insane. Brain trauma, permanent brain damage or
concussion injuries? Yeah, concussion injuries and MRI scans are showing up for people with Havana Syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, the whole Agent Orange thing is another good parallel where for years, the government, there's nothing wrong. But finally, with enough pressure, they recognized the effects, and now the veterans can get treatment for it.
Yeah, and that's what Colonel Eggerman mentioned. He mentioned that this is an analogy. He used Agent Orange specifically as to how they need to approach this phenomena.
Exactly. Well, tell us about, if you don't mind sharing about your personal experience, near death, and your viewpoints too, because again, we like strong spirituality and,
So,
we talk about our stuff, but it's nice to know that there is a large universe and there are powers of good above us. That will help us.
The remote viewing phenomena, all of that, it's real. I can't deny it, only because I've worked with groups and we've used controls, and the accuracy in what they come back with. Sometimes I'm just blown away, but I know that that's real.
Yeah,
now, when it comes
2
to
days ago, Jesse, I was at this conference, and the witches, which included my wife, things like knowing what card you pull out, guessing, or reading your mind, where they can tell very personal things at you just by for them it's no big deal, but it's when I'm used to it, but then I go, this is pretty amazing. So, and of course,
yeah.
So I read all about remote viewing and all the government programs. And when I was in Chicago, I had a friend, she was a psychic. The Chicago police used her whenever they were stumped, and she would help them get to the next step.
Yeah, I don't know if you have any Skinwalker Ranch fans. I'm sure you do.
Oh, yeah.
We were 2 years ago, I worked with a couple of individuals, and they were doing a remote viewing exercise into a mountain in Alaska. And there was another famous remote viewer who did something similar. And what was interesting is during this session, they talked about seeing these ships, flying ships that were unusual. And they described them as being shaped like mantas, and that the skin material on these were very unusual texture. And then I was watching an episode of Beyond Skinwalker, and they were looking at a ranch here in Nevada, where I'm at. Mm-hmm. And they were using technology, LiDAR technology, to look underground. And approximately between 100 and 200 feet underground, they were finding an object. And when they came back, they described this object as being in the shape of a manta. And it brought me back to that RV session that I was involved in. And I think we're going to find out when they get to it that it's probably going to be exactly what was described to me in Alaska. But anyway,
sure.
So yeah. So talk about near-death experience. I was asked during my last interview, about regression, being that I do hypnosis and I do regression therapy. And he said, there's a lot of people you're going to make upset. They don't believe in past lives and so forth. And he goes, well, what are your thoughts on that? And just when you do these regressions, is it real for these individuals? And I said, well, I have to dwell on my experience. And when I was 6 years old, I had a tonsillectomy and I hemorrhaged. And my father had a 57 Chevy, and I'm just bleeding out like a hose. And he throws me in the floorboard in the back seat, and he just hauls to the hospital, and he's picks me up. He's crying. He's begging the hospital, please save my son. And so I remember being in the OR and on the table, and they say, we're losing him. And then I float to the corner of the operating room, and they're doing CPR on me as a 6-year-old boy. And I remember being in darkness, and I see this light, and I go to the light, and I ask everyone, and I said, as a 6-year-old child, who are the two most important people in their lives? It's mom and dad, right? And the kind of love that mom and dad has for you, or you have for mom and dad at that age, is incredible. And all I can describe is when I was in that light, that it was that kind of love times infinity. Wow. And there was no way I wanted to leave. And then a male voice comes to me and says, sorry, it's not your time. And I'm a 6-year-old child, and I'm crying. I go, I don't want to go back. And again, it says, I'm sorry, it's not your time. And then I start to feel the falling sensation, hit the cold operating table. And they go, we got him back. Because of that experience, I strongly believe that reincarnation is real. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to hypnotherapy and doing regression, I've had some cases where I can't explain, like people speaking a language they shouldn't know, or a child speaking a language that they should not know. I can't explain those. And I had the most recent session where this young lady, we regressed her, and usually someone regressed into a human form, but she was an energetic form. And what was strange, the only way I can describe the environment is that it was some type of transitional holding environment where there were a bunch of spiritual beings, energy beings, as she was describing. But what was crazy and unique about this is that the room itself where we were doing this regression became electrified. Everyone in the room, we had some individuals walk into the room, and they could feel their hair standing on end from the electricity. I can't explain that. And what we want to do next time when we work with her is like have a FLIR device. We want to have all kinds of equipment just to test the environment to see if it was a fluke or is there something really rational there. But I guess what I'm getting at is that even though I may be scientific based, because of my near-death experience, I've always kept an open mind. And it's important that we keep an open mind. Because if we keep reincarnating, there's a reason we do, and we're here to learn something. And if you don't ascend by continuing to learn, whatever that lesson may be, you're going to continue to relive what you're going through. And so that's why I say it's important to all the listeners that it's important that you do keep that open mind. It's important that you lead with love, important kindness. Don't be a pushover, by no means. Don't ever be a pushover. But whenever you're making any type of decision, so if you lead from the heart, most of the time you're going to make the right one.
Beautifully said, Jesse. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and as I tell people, there is always a solution. There is help out there. Don't despair. Just keep looking. Go inward, calm yourself down, do what you can. There is a solution. You're not crazy. This world is crazy.
Yes.
As we've seen by everything you've discussed tonight, we are ruled by psychopaths. We're not the ones who are psychopaths or
that is true. A bunch of narcissist psychopaths, and that's exactly what we're dealing with. We're dealing with narcissistic minds. Yeah, and it's unfortunate. Yeah.
I think there's the spirituality enters into the reason that's happening, because like as Gnostics, we always imagine, the Archons, the demiurge, controlling people and creating, a world of, where this type of stuff happens. And it used to be, I don't know, maybe it never was, but if people were in touch with positive spiritual entities, this would happen less often, because the people in control, wouldn't want to do this. They realize their connection to everybody else, and eventually it's going to come back on them, right? But the problem is that as social animals, we give away our protection to smaller groups of people like the government, right? And the protectors turn into the oppressors. It almost always happens after a while. I'm not sure. We got to solve that problem before we can keep this kind of stuff that you're relating to us from happening,
Yeah, no, most definitely. Yeah. So, I'd like to close. We're almost going on an hour and a half, though.
Sure,
Just to your listeners, if you can, this mindnexuslive.com, if you go to that website, you'll see all the speakers that we have. We have John D'Souza, who was the original X-Men they used his diaries to create the X-Files. Mm-hmm. Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot's going to be there. Dr. John Hall, who will be speaking about where this technology is today. And I mean, that's an eye-opener. I will be speaking and doing live demonstrations about what I was talking about. If you're highly suggestible, we'll show you by just having a conversation what can be done. We have Ben Chastain, who has a large following. Dr. Rima Lebeau, who was married to General Stubblebine. Dr. Früchter, who very popular and insightful in the Phoenix, Arizona area. A few more. There's Tyler Koala and Aaron Kuhn. Journey to Truth podcast will be there. Mikhail Mael, who's spiritualism, and Jen and Brian, who are also spiritualists. Their last name is skipping me right now. But just an all-star lineup. It's a one-of-its-kind, unique conference. It goes from the September 27th through the 29th. If you use the code MNexus to all of your users, for those who want to attend in person, it'll get you $50 off. And if you can't attend in person, we're doing live stream for $99. You'll have access for the entire weekend up to a year. And our goal is to get 10,000 live streamers on there. And if we can make this a success, or eventually what we'd like to do is create a facility where we can have the professionals there for individuals who are suffering from the Havana Syndrome, or AHIs is what they're calling it now, so that we can give you help.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Of course, I will have this on the show notes. I highly recommend it. I was looking at your website. Such an amazing array of speakers. And again, very holistic, different, not everybody's this or that, or military or psychology, or it's like a great variety of speakers and people who.
Yeah, all different topics. It's not just going to be about this. So it's going to be an eye-opening event.
Yeah, God, for $99, that is a steal for online events.
Yeah.
So, but of course, I just did my conference. Yeah, going person to person is so magic. The connection and meeting people, that's where the magic is. So definitely check it out. Yeah, but anything else you want to talk about, Jesse, or are we good?
No, I think that might wrap it up.
All right. Yeah, I'd like to couple of super chats. Mike Frank, thank you for the support. Really appreciate it. And Echoes of Infinity, thank you for the super chat. He says, thank you for the live. Yes, the incredibly, people were scared, but great feedback. People are hopeful and they're very interested. So we got it. So but we are at the end. First, I'd like to say, Vance, thanks for keeping us company.
Sure. I'm going to be sleeping next to my spectrum analyzer tonight.
And if you ever want to be scanned and you're ever in the area, just come visit me.
Yeah.
Not too far. I'm in California, so.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Well, Jesse, thank you very much for being here. Very happy you've done what you've done. You're doing a great service for humanity, for the spirits, for our descendants, for our children, for our country. So thank you very much, and keep doing what you're doing. And we hope to talk to you or anybody else from Mind Nexus. It's
if you want anyone on that list you want to have on your show, just let me know. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I'd love to talk to them. Great figures. And we'll continue talking for sure.
Okay. Take care, and thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. And stay vigilant and stay out of trouble and stay out of those brain chips. Good night.